Good day, Scratch fans. This is Bill Stannard from EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions, this one titled Scratch Lesson Number 2, The Game of Pong. I'll go ahead and run the game, and then you can get a sense of what we will be building together. As you can see, the soccer ball bounces around the enclosure, and when I move I missed it. When I move the paddle under the soccer ball, I get a point. Okay, I can stop the game, start it again, score goes back down to 0. Let's see how we build this. So I'm going to go back. Here's the code we're going to be building. I'm going to start with a new file. And as you know, every time we start with a new file, we have Scratch the Cat there. We are going to get rid of Scratch the Cat because we're going to add a soccer ball and a paddle. So I'm going to click on the trash can down here, and Scratch the Cat disappears. And I am going to add a sprite, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the little magnifying glass and choose a sprite. Now you can choose any sort of sprite you like, but you probably want it to be ball shaped because it is going to be bouncing around. We could do a simple ball, but I like to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to go into sports, and I think in this case I'm going to pick a tennis ball. Okay, so now we have a tennis ball, and we're also going to need a paddle. But before we put the paddle in, let's make sure that we can get the tennis ball moving around. So the first thing we're going to need to do is in controls and in events, we have when the green flag is clicked. So I'm going to drag that out here. And that means when the game starts, when somebody clicks on the green flag up here, things will start to happen. Well, the first thing I want to have happen is I want the ball to return to the center of the screen. So I am going to move the ball to the center of the screen as soon as the game starts. So I'm going to do that by getting a motion code. And you'll notice right now, the motion code go to X is already set for 13 on the X-axis and -3 on the Y-axis. So I'm going to drag that over there, and let's see if this really works. I'm going to grab my tennis ball and move it over here. And I'm doing that just by left-clicking on it. If I now click on this code, zoop, goes right back to where it started, which is pretty close to the center. The second thing I want it to do is I want it to be aimed in a particular direction. Now, it's a round ball. It's difficult to tell how it's aimed, but if we go over here, we have a piece of code called point in direction. I'm going to drag that out here. And it tells us right now that that sprite is pointed in the direction of 90 degrees. I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that we get this really neat sort of a clock face, and we can change the direction in which the tennis ball is pointed by moving it up to 45 degrees. So this is 0 up at 12 o'clock, and this is 90 at 3 o'clock. So 45 degrees is about halfway in between. So when the game starts, it's going to be pointed at 45 degrees. And you'll see why in a little bit, but I'll give you a hint now. If we just had it pointed at 90 degrees, all the ball would do would be bounce off of one wall to the right and the other wall to the left, going back and forth, back and forth. Very boring tennis game. So we want it to go off in this direction, and when it hits this wall, it'll go up here, and then it'll come back down here and go down here. So it'll bounce all over the place. Well, let's get it moving. to do that, we need a loop that will go on forever. And I'm going to come over here and look under Control, and right next to the Control button, I have Forever. Now notice that I have this code at the beginning of the game before the forever loop, because the code starts here, goes down to there, down to there. And in the forever loop, I want this ball to move 15 steps. Okay, that's motion. So I'm going to come back up here to motion, and I'm going to bring in a move 10 steps, click on it, change it to 15. So now it's going to move 15 steps. Let's try it out. It's a good idea to try out your code before you go too far. So that way, if you made a mistake, you catch it early. So I'm going to hit the green flag, or I could just come over here and click on the code. Either one will work. So let's see if it actually goes 15 steps. Yep. And then it gets stuck up in the corner. It's going to keep moving 15 steps, 15 steps, 15 steps, repeating and repeating and repeating. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to hit the green flag again. And notice it goes back to the center and then starts moving. Well, when it gets up here, you see I can kind of drag it back. When it gets, whoa, I can drag it back. And it, whoa, wait, I can drag it back. Okay, I need to drag it back, and then I need to stop it if I'm fast enough. Okay, now I'm going to stop. I've stopped it. Now I can drag it back. Whoa, got away from me there. Okay, so what I wanted to do when it hits an edge, I want it to bounce. Let's see if there's anything in motion that will help me do that. If I scroll down here, yes, there is. If on edge, bounce. So now, let's go ahead and click the code. And there we go. It's now bouncing all over the place. Well, we know that code works. So if you click on the code again, it will stop. So that's pretty good. We know it's bouncing around. Okay, let's bring in a paddle. That should be our next step. And a simple paddle. If we go and get another sprite, choose a sprite. Okay. And I know I'm looking for a paddle, so I'm just going to type paddle in here. There it is, a nice green paddle. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. And now here's my paddle, and I'm going to bring it down near the bottom. Okay. And what I want the paddle to do is move backwards and forwards, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, when I move the mouse. And when do I want to do that? I want to do that as soon as the game starts. So I'm going to go here to Control, up to Events. When the green flag is clicked, and down to Control. And I want this to happen throughout the entire game, so I use a forever loop. And I want the paddle to go back and forth following my mouse. Okay, so that looks interesting. If I come up here and I go to Motion, I want it to move along which axis? Well, if you think about math class, that's the x-axis. So I am going to set the x position in here, and I am going to set it to the mouse. So wherever the mouse is, this guy should follow, just on the x-axis. So to find the mouse, I'm going to have to go to Sensing. And if I look here, I am going to find the mouse. So I'm going to set the X to the mouse's X. So I'm going to drag this here. So wherever the mouse is along the X-axis, that's where this guy will go. Let's try that out. I'm going to click on this. And now you notice that even if I'm up here, the paddle follows the mouse. Good. Okay, so now we have two pieces working. So we have the paddle following the mouse, and we have the ball bouncing. Okay, so if we click this, there we go. Okay, the ball is still bouncing. Doesn't seem to have any effect whether it hits the paddle or not. Okay, so we need to do something about that. Let's stop this, and let's go back and look at the code for the ball. If you look at the code for the ball, we could add code in there, or what we usually do in Scratch is move this off to the side a little bit, grab another one of these green flags, okay, and start another piece of code. We can have more than one green flag code in there. And this one we're going to have a forever loop. So if we go to Control, forever loop, most games have a forever loop that are driving what's going on. And we want to say, if we are touching the paddle, we want something to happen. In other words, every time the ball touches the paddle, we want something to happen. So I'm going to grab an if-then. And I'm going to put it inside of the forever loop. Don't put it outside. Put it inside the forever loop. Now we need something here, so we can say if something happens, and that something is going to have to be sensed. So I'm going to go to senses, and what we want to say is if the ball is touching the paddle. So I'm going to grab this touching one. I'm going to put it in here. And notice it says mouse pointer. I want to change that. It's got a little tiny triangle pointed down. So now, if it's touching the paddle, I want something to happen. Okay, what do I want to happen when it's touching the paddle? Well, the first thing I want it to do is change direction. Okay, so I am going to have it turn. Well, that's a motion, so I'm going to go back to motion, and I'm going to have it turn, and in this case, I'm picking turn to the right. You could do turn to the left. And how far do I want it to turn? Well, more than 15 degrees, but maybe less. I don't know. I'd like it to be sort of random, which would be kind of fun. So I need to grab a random, and I'm going to find that in the green area operators. And I'm going to pick a random number. I'm going to put that right on top of the turn. There we go. So I'm going to have a random number. I'm going to clear this a little bit so you can see the whole thing. And I've experimented with this, and I'm going to pick a random number between 160 and 200 degrees. You could change this, but 160 to 200 degrees works pretty well. And when that happens, I want it to move 15 steps. So that's a motion. I'm going to go back and grab that. Make sure it's in there with the turn inside of this if statement, which is inside of the forever statement. And let's actually add a sound. That'd be kind of fun. So I'm going to come over here and sound, and I'm going to play a sound pop. Okay? So I'm going to play a sound pop. And I'm going to put this down here. Maybe I'll have it play the sound, the first thing that it does. What does pop sound like? Let's click on it. Okay. Let's see what pop sounds like. I'm going to click on it over here. Yeah, that sounds like a tennis ball hitting a paddle. So let's go ahead and try that and see if that works. Green flag. Whoa, get a double bop. Oh, it got tracked. Okay, I may have to move my paddle a little bit closer to the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to stop this because it looks like the ball is getting trapped down there. So I'm going to move this guy a little closer to the bottom of the screen, and now try it. Oh, it's still getting trapped. Okay, one of the things we know that if it's running, it's getting caught down there. So let's take a look at some of our code. It comes down here and it moves 15 steps, and then if it's on an edge, it bounces. What would happen if we reverse these two? I'm going to pull these guys out, and I'm going to put this guy on top. And now let's try the code, see if it's a little bit better. Ah, much better. That way it occasionally, much better. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we are going to grab a scoring piece. So a score we're going to find under variables. I am going to click on make a variable. I'm going to call it score, and I'm going to click OK. And you'll see when I do that, it puts a score right up here. Well, we want that score to go up every single time that we hit that paddle, right? So where do we have it hit the paddle? We have it hit the paddle in here. So let's change the variable by 1. I'm going to put it down here under move 15 steps. And that's the variable we want to change, is score. Okay. And at the beginning of the game, okay, we want to set the score to 0. So let's bring a set score to 0 and put it over here. And we're going to set the score to 0. Okay, let's try that out. So if I don't hit the paddle, I don't get a score. And if I do hit the paddle, I do get a score. And that's kind of what we're looking for. So this is Bill Stannard from Yes EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions, and this one, Scratch lesson number 2, the amazing Pong game. Thanks for watching. By the way, before we're finished here, let's go ahead and give this game a title. Click up here where it says Untitled, highlight it, and let's call it Pong Game. Okay, that way when you save it, you'll know that it's your Pong game. So once you've typed that in there, hit the Enter key. We've now saved it as Pong Game.